Barn's dry. Take it.
I'll not ask you for the house. She said it twice. The rain came off the eave between them and took the first one. It was the 24th of October, 1884, a Friday evening at the kitchen door of the Maddox place, 7 miles east of Juniper Prairie, Oregon. It had rained since noon, and then it had gotten serious about it. The man in the doorway was Garrett Maddox, 38, with a lamp in one hand, and the door in the other, which is a way of standing that has not made up its mind. The woman on the step had a shawl over her head and both arms full inside it. Say it again. I'll not ask you for the house. Your barn's dry, and I'd be glad of it till daylight. That's all of it. That's the asking part. Here's the rest. I can milk and I can cook. Let me have the barn and your cows done before you're up, and you'll not know I was here except by that. How far? Juniper Prairie. A man with a load of shakes carried us to the fork, the rest afoot. He looked at the shawl and then passed her at the rain, which was the easier thing to look at. Barn's dry, he said. Take it. He shut the door. It opened again before she had moved, and he put a tin cup into her hands, hot enough that she had to shift it twice, with bread laid over the top. Pail's on the bench inside the barn door, he said. If you meant it. I meant it. Then come to the kitchen door at daylight. Now, the quiet. Garrett Maddox had been on that ground 11 years, and by himself in the house for 2 of them. His wife died in the second week of October 1882, and he had not said much about it since, to anybody, himself included. A house with 2 people in it makes a sound all day, and none of it is worth remarking on until it stops. A chair pulled out, a lid down on a pot, a spoon going around in a crock in the next room, somebody singing a hymn wrong and not caring who hears. After that October, he ate standing at the stove, because pulling a chair out made a noise, and then nothing came after the noise. The kitchen window had swelled shut the first winter, and he had not taken a plane to it, so that room heard nothing from the yard. The rain quit at 4 a.m, all at once, the way it does. That was when he heard her. 60 feet off, through a barn wall and a shut window, a baby came awake and said so, and stopped and said so again. Garrett Maddox stood in the dark of his kitchen, with his hand on the back of a chair he did not pull out. He came out at first grey. The roan cow stood at the fence chewing and done. The pail was on the bench inside the barn door with a clean cloth over it. The blankets were folded square on the manger rail, and the floor where she had slept was swept, which nobody had asked for. She was at the wood pile with the baby slung in the shawl against her, splitting kindling one-handed and doing it well. You've been up a while. I sleep light. She sees to that. He looked into the pail. That's more than the cow gives me. You milk her cold, and she minds it. Warm your hands first, and she'll not hold any back. Cobb, the old hand, came across the yard and took his hat off, which he had not done for company in a long time. Cobb, Garrett Maddox said. Mrs. Greer, ma'am. That was the whole of the introductions on that place. Where were you making for? 12 miles on. A woman at the hotel there said there'd be work when the freighters came through. That's a wet 12 miles with a young one. It is. He did not say stay. He put his hand on the top of the gate and looked at the cow. She's milked at daylight, and again at 4, he said. If you're here, I'll be here today. Then we'll say today. I have picked my way through a good many recollections out of that country, the kind people set down when they were old and had the time. And the thing that turns up oftenest in them is not the scenery, it is who took them in. A house on a road out there was expected to open. A traveler came at dark and was fed and put up by the stove or out in the hay, and went on in the morning. And no money changed hands over it, because taking money would have made it a different thing entirely. People kept the latch string out, and the phrase meant what it said. I would not make it prettier than it was. Plenty of houses did it grudging, but the custom held, and a man who turned somebody away in weather had that told about him for 20 years. The other half of it is the half people forget. You could not pay, you could work. A woman who came in wet and went out in the morning having done the milking had not been given charity, and both parties understood that. And it was the whole of the arrangement. The two people in this story are mine. The rain is not, and neither is the custom. Listen to that house a while before anybody knocks on it. The quiet in it was not grief exactly. Grief is loud for a season, and then it goes and takes a job somewhere inside a man. What was left was a habit. He had stopped doing anything that made a noise he would have to hear the end of. By that autumn, he was so good at it that he no longer knew he was doing it, which is where a thing like that turns dangerous. On Sunday the 26th of October, he came in at dark and said it standing up, with his hat still on. There's work on this place I've not been doing since my wife died. The wash, the cooking, the milking. I've been letting it go and calling it getting along. I've seen the kitchen. $3 a week, and the board for the both of you. That's town wages, and I'll hear no argument, because you're doing town work and ranch work in the same day. Tessa Greer put the baby up on her shoulder and took longer over it than he expected. I'll take the wages when I've worked a week that's worth them, she said. Not before, and I keep the barn till then. That's a poor bargain, and it's against yourself. It's mine, though. Another day then, he said, and another one after that. I'll quit saying it every morning. The noise came back into that house, the way water comes back into a dry ditch. Not all at once, and not where you were watching. A knife on a board, twice a day. A chair pulled out and pushed in and pulled out again. The oven door, which had a squeal in the hinge he had never heard, never having used it. And the pail. An empty tin pail rings when the first of the milk hits it, high and thin. The ring goes flat as it fills. By the time it is full, it says nothing at all. That happened at daylight, and again at 4, 60 feet from the kitchen window. The baby woke at 4, and again about 7, and had opinions both times. And once, in the second week, humming from the front room, when she thought the yard was empty. He began sitting down to eat, the first time without noticing, the second time knowing exactly what he was about. Cobb slept over the harness room and was going deaf, which on that place had cost him nothing. He noticed everything and mentioned one thing. I heard that young one clear out to the harness room this morning, he said. I ain't heard a thing out of this house since the year before last. That evening she went to shut the kitchen door against the cold. "Leave the door," Garrett Maddox said. "It's cold, Mr. Maddox." "Leave it." He gave no reason. She left it and went on with the supper. There was a room off the kitchen that had been his wife's, with a window that had not opened in 2 winters. He put it to her on the last day of October, out in the yard, where such a thing is easier to say. "There's a room in the house. It has a stove wall on one side of it, and the barn hasn't. Tomorrow's the 1st of November, and the weather is turning. Not for nothing. It's not for nothing. It's for the milking, and the cooking, and the wash, and I'm getting the better end of it. Then take $1 off my wages for it. 2 a week in the room." Garrett Maddox looked at her a good while. "You drive harder against yourself than any man I ever traded with." "I'll not be somebody's kindness. I was that in August, and it was worse than the road. 2 then." He carried his wife's things up to the loft himself that afternoon, and did not make a business of it. Then he took a plane to the window sash and shaved it down, and the window came up 2 inches, and then all the way, with a sound like a boot coming out of mud. He stood there with the plane in his hand and listened to the yard come into that room. Then he went and did the kitchen window. November on that place was mud and short light and everything to do at once. Cobb built a cradle out of a grain box, 4 evenings at it in the harness room, and would not be thanked. It had a rocker that creaked on the downside, and he refused to fix it, on the grounds that a man out in the barn could tell from the creak whether anybody was minding the baby. Tessa Greer took every stitch of clothing out of that bunkhouse, and what came back was mended in places Cobb had given up on in 1879. That was the shape of the month. He put a new step on the porch, because she went up and down it, 40 times a day in the dark. She turned his garden ground over, before the frost took it. He brought a stove in for her room, and neither of them once said thank you where the other could hear it. Mrs. Lavina Purdy came over 4 miles on the 6th, with a basket of apples, and stayed an hour, and looked at everything in that kitchen twice. She was a good woman, and she meant well, and she said it at the door on her way out quietly. "You'll want to take care, my dear. Not for your own sake, for his. I am not going to let that town off easy, and I am not going to hang anybody for it either. Here is what Juniper Prairie had. A widower on a good place at 38, who had been the object of general sympathy for 2 years and of general management for about half that. A young woman nobody had brought there, and nobody could place on that man's ground, with a baby, and no husband anywhere in sight. And winter coming on, which is the season for talk, the way August is the season for hay. Nobody was cruel about it. I want that understood. There was no ringleader. And that is the trouble with talk. If there had been one, you could have gone and seen him, and had it out. What there was instead was a lowering of the voice when she came into a room, and a raising of it after she went out. Most of them meant it kindly. They thought they were keeping a good man from being taken in, and they had all settled it among themselves, without a word said, that she had come out there to be provided for. She had never once in her life been provided for. That was the whole difficulty. The 8th of November was a Saturday, and she went in with the wagon for flour and needles. 2 women at the dry goods shelf stopped talking when she came down the aisle, and started again on the weather. And the weather is a poor thing to be caught starting on. A man by the stove was kind to her, in the way that is worse than the other. He said he had heard she'd had a hard time of it, and that folks out here always looked after their own. At the counter, Marsden asked whether to charge it to the Maddox place. No, she said, and paid him out of her own money. Here is what the town had never asked her. She was born in Illinois, married at 20, and was 22 when they came out in the spring of 1884 with 3 wagons. The baby was born the first week of July, west of the Snake, in a tent. Her husband took a fever at the last crossing and was buried in the second week of August, 3 days east of the mountains. The party went on without her because she told them to go. She cooked at the hotel in Juniper Prairie through the harvest. When the threshing crews went out, the hotel shut its kitchen for the winter, and that is how a woman comes to be walking a road in the rain with all she owns in one shawl. Garrett Maddox was in the doorway when the man by the stove said his kind thing. He did not answer it. He carried the flour out to the wagon, and they were 4 miles down the road before either of them said anything. And what they said was about the flour. She waited 2 days and then set it at the kitchen table with both hands flat on it, which was how she said hard things. I'll go on the 15th. Garrett Maddox did not answer for a space. The work's not been complained of. The work's been good and you know it. It isn't the work. It's what the talk costs you. And nobody ever asked you whether you'd pay it. I'll decide what I pay for. You'll be here 40 years. You've got neighbors and a place with your name on it. I've been here since October. He stood up and put his back to the room, which was a thing he did instead of arguing. Talk about a woman out here costs her, and then it's done. Talk about a man goes on costing, because he has to stay and be looked at. She asked him for one thing. If anybody asks what I was on this place, say I was hired, and say what I was paid. That's all I want off you, and it costs you nothing but the saying. That night, he took the lantern out to the barn and stood in the corner where she had slept the first night. It was swept. There was nothing in it at all. He had been alone in that house 2 years and had gotten good at it. Standing in that corner, he found out that a man loses the knack of it faster than he got it. He took the bay out before daylight the next morning and rode the 12 miles. The work at that hotel was real. He asked to see where a woman with a young one would sleep, and they showed him a lean-to off the wash house, boarded on 3 sides, a curtain on the 4th, and no stove in it. The woman who ran the place was not unkind. She had her own troubles, and did not pretend the shed was a room. He came into his own yard after dark. Cobb was at the barn door with a lantern. Horses wet to the hocks. He is. Then Garrett Maddox went in and ate his supper, and said nothing about where he had been, or about a curtain on one side of a shed, or about the 24 miles he had put on a horse to find out a thing he could have asked her. That was the wrong thing, and it was the same wrong thing he had been doing for 2 years. He came home knowing something, and put it away without saying it. The 15th was 4 days off. The quiet came back into that house faster than it had gone out of it. She stopped humming. He went back to eating at the stove, standing, and if she noticed, she did not say. She took to doing the milking early, before he crossed the yard, so that neither of them had to be out there at the same time. The cradle still creaked on the downside. That was the only sound in the house that nobody had taken back. On the 13th, she came in from the yard with the pail and shut the door behind her with her heel. He did not say leave it. Cobb, who missed most of what was said to him, put his hat on the table that evening and looked at the two of them. "It's gone quiet in here again," he said. Nobody answered him, which he took for confirmation. She got her bundle down that night, 2 days before she needed it, the way people do when they are afraid of changing their minds. Turn around here and look at it from her side of the door, because from his side, it looks like kindness, and it was not only that. What Tessa Greer carried into that yard in October was a shawl, a tin plate, and a girl not 4 months old. She had not asked one person on that road for anything she had not offered, to work off first, and she had gone hungry twice rather than break that rule, and never mentioned either time to anybody. She was not proud in the useless way. She would take a room and wages and a stove carried in for her, because those were traded for. What she could not do was stay on in a house where the only thing holding her was goodwill. Goodwill runs out. Nobody tells you the day it is going to. And there is this, which she never said out loud to anybody. She had heard that house change too, and heard it before he did. She had a name of her own for what was going on in those rooms by November, and she would not use it, because using it would have made her the thing the town had already decided she was. The 14th of November came in with sleet on it. He came in at dark and did not take his coat off. Her bundle was by the door, where it had been since the night before. "Sit down," he said. "No, stay standing. I've got something to say and I'll say it once." She stayed standing. "There's a knife on that board twice a day. There's a chair gets pulled out. There's the pail ringing out in the yard at 4 o'clock. There's a young one hollering at me at daylight. There's somebody humming in my front room who thinks I'm out in the barn." He had not said that many words at a stretch in 2 years, and it was costing him. "This house has been quiet so long I stopped hearing it. You knocked, and I heard it again. Now hear the rest, because I'll not have you deciding on half of it. The work is real, and the wages are real, and they'll be real, Saturday, whether you're on the wagon or you're not. I've not asked you for a thing, and I'm not going to. What I've said is the fact of my house. What's to be done about it is yours to say." Then he took his coat off, because he had run out. She did not answer him that night. He did not stand there waiting for her to. I have taken some trouble over what a widowed man on a place like that actually did about his eating and his washing and his mending. And the short of it is that he did them badly and told everybody he was doing fine. He ate what could be done in one pot. The mending stacked up in a chair nobody sat in. But that is not the cost. Plenty of widowers kept a clean house and a good table, and were the better cook of the two all along. The cost was quieter. A house with nobody in it but a man stopped being a house anybody called at. Neighbors came to the barn instead and stood in the yard and did their business and went. Nobody sets that down straight. It comes out sideways. Years later, in one line about how long it had been since anybody came up the lane. The 15th of November was a Saturday. Nobody hitched the wagon. Nobody said anything about the wagon. At daylight she went out and did the milking, and the pail rang high and thin, and then went flat as it filled. And Garrett Maddox stood in his kitchen with his hands on the back of a chair. and listened to it go, from a ring to nothing. She did not say she was staying. He did not ask her to. The bundle went back under the bed and was not mentioned again that year. Mrs. Purdy came again on the 17th and stayed 2 hours and did not say at the door the things she had said there before. She left a length of flannel on the table with nothing said about it, which is a way of saying a good deal. On the 22nd of November, at Marsden's counter, with 5 people in the store, Garrett Maddox said one sentence in a level voice. Mrs. Greer is hired on my place, and she's paid every Saturday, and I'd take it kindly if that got said around as often as the other thing. Then he bought his coal oil and went out. Nobody apologized, and nobody was run out of that county. The talk did not stop so much as run out of anything to be about. In the barn that week, she asked Cobb the only question she ever asked about Garrett Maddox. Was he like this before? Cobb took his time with it. No, ma'am. He was worse. He used to sing. The first snow came in after dark on the 1st of December. It was quiet in the morning in a way that was not the same quiet at all. Snow takes the sound out of a country. The road goes, and the yard goes, and the roof gives back nothing, and a man can stand on his own porch and hear his own ears. That was outside. Inside, the oven door squealed, and a chair went back, and the cradle creaked on the downside. And a girl not quite 5 months old had a great deal to say about the temperature of her own morning. For the first time in 2 years, the inside of that house was louder than the outside of it. Garrett Maddox stood at the kitchen window with the sash up a hand's width and the cold coming in over the sill. Cobb came through and told him he was letting the heat out. He did not answer, because out in the white of that yard, coming up from the barn, there was a pail with milk in it, and a woman carrying it. And that was the only sound in the whole country that morning, and he had no intention of shutting the window on it. She came in and set the pail down and kept her coat on. I'll say it now. You've had a good while of me not saying it, and that's long enough. Say it then. I'll keep my wages in my own name a while yet. I'll not have one soul in this county able to say you took me in out of pity, because that is not what happened. And I'll not have it said in front of her when she's old enough to hear it. That's fair. And you'll not ask me anything in the winter. Ask me in the spring, when I've been here long enough that nobody can call it the weather. Spring then. There's one more. She took the cloth off the pail. You got your house back the night I knocked. I've not had one since the road. If you can stand the noise the two of us make, I'll stay and make it. Garrett Maddox opened his mouth and did not find anything worth saying over that. She had the coffee pot in one hand and the baby in the other. So she put the baby into his arms, the way you hand a thing to whoever is standing nearest. The girl got hold of his forefinger and did not give it back. He stood in the middle of his own kitchen with a child on one arm and a forefinger he could not have back, which left him nothing to do with the rest of himself. You'll want to sit down, Tessa Greer said. She'll be a while. He sat down. I would like to leave them in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, because the ordinary Tuesday is the whole prize. He set the table himself that morning, which he had not done in 2 years, and he set 3 places at it. Cobb had eaten in that bunkhouse 11 years, and was told he could come in or go hungry. He complained about it the rest of his life and never missed a meal. There was no plate for the fourth one, who was not quite 5 months old and slept through all of it in a grain box by the stove. He asked her in April, out at the gate, and got the answer she had settled on in December, and she made him ask twice, on the grounds that a thing said once is not a habit. On the first cold morning of the next autumn, he stopped at the kitchen door. "Leave the door," he said. "I know," she said, "so you can hear us." He had never once said that part out loud, and he did not say it then either. She asked for the barn. What she got instead was a room with a window that opens, a chair pulled out for her twice a day, and a man who will stand at an open sash in the snow, rather than let his house go quiet on him again. The pail is still on the bench inside the barn door. It rings high and thin when the first of it hits and goes flat as it fills, and when it is full it says nothing at all. There is not a soul in that house who cannot tell you from the kitchen exactly how far along she has gotten. Good night.